The carriage wheel cracked against a stone, and Eleanor Hargrove seized the leather strap above the door as her body pitched sideways. Rain hammered the roof in sheets. Through the fogged window, she could see nothing but the smear of lantern light on wet gravel and, rising above it like a cliff face, the black outline of a house that had no business being this large. She had been told she was traveling to accept the charity of a distant cousin, a gentleman of modest means. She counted the windows on the front facade, 14 on the ground floor alone, and felt the first cold thread of understanding that she had been lied to. The driver opened the carriage door, and the storm reached in for her. Rain struck her face, her neck, soaked through the collar of her grey travelling dress within seconds. She stepped down onto gravel that shifted under her boots, one hand gripping her single trunk, the other holding her shawl against her throat. Lightning split the sky behind the house, and for one bright instant, she saw it whole. 3 stories of pale stone, a portico with columns, an east wing with ivy climbing toward a lit window. Then darkness swallowed it back. The front door was already open. A woman stood in the frame, candle in hand, her face creased with the particular warmth of someone who has been watching the road. "Miss Hargrove." The woman reached for her trunk. Come in. You're soaked through. Your room is ready." Eleanor stepped across the threshold into an entrance hall that smelled of beeswax and wood smoke. Her boots left wet prints on stone floors that had been polished to a shine no modest gentleman could afford. She always counted, the paintings in the hallway. 7. The silver candlesticks on the sideboard. 4. The servants who appeared from doorways to take her wet shawl, her gloves, her trunk. 3. "You said my room is ready." "Yes, miss." "It's been ready for some time." "How long is some time?" The housekeeper paused at the base of the staircase. The candle threw her shadow tall against the wall. 17 years, miss." Eleanor's hand found the banister. The wood was smooth under her fingers, worn by decades of palms that were not hers. 17 years. She had been 6 years old 17 years ago. She had been learning to play the pianoforte and pulling weeds in her father's garden, and believing, with the unshakable faith of a child, that the world contained no secrets that could not be solved by looking closely enough. "I think," Eleanor said, "that I would like to meet the gentleman of modest means, who has been preparing a room for me since before I could read." The housekeeper led her up the staircase, down a corridor lit by candles in iron sconces, and stopped before a door at the end of the east wing. She opened it. Eleanor stepped inside and felt the ground beneath her understanding shift. The room had been built for her, not in the general sense of a guest chamber made comfortable, in the specific, surgical sense of a room assembled by someone who had studied her from a distance. A writing desk, positioned beneath the window, angled to catch morning light. Shelves lined with volumes she recognized. Petrarch in the original Italian, Newton's Principia, a botanical encyclopedia she had once mentioned wanting in a letter to her father. A pianoforte stood against the far wall, its lid open, its keys gleaming in the firelight, as though someone had polished them that afternoon. Eleanor crossed the room. She touched the spine of the Petrarch. She pressed one key on the pianoforte, a middle C that rang pure and tuned in a house where no woman lived. Her finger trembled against the ivory, and she pulled it back. "Who is he?" she asked, without turning around. "The Duke of Ashworth, miss." "My father's enemy?" "Yes, miss." "And he has kept a pianoforte tuned for 17 years for the daughter of the man he hates." The housekeeper said nothing. The candle flickered. Rain lashed the window in the silence, and Eleanor stood in a room that knew her better than she knew herself, and understood that every fact she had built her life upon was about to come apart. She did not sleep. She sat at the writing desk with the fire burning low, and counted the things she knew. Her father was dead. His solicitor had told her she was destitute. A distant cousin had offered temporary shelter. She had packed a single trunk. She had boarded a carriage in London 4 days ago, and she had arrived at the house of the man her father had cursed every birthday, every Christmas, every evening when the wine made him reckless and his voice turned to iron. The Duke of Ashworth, destroyer of their family, thief of their inheritance, the name spoken with the ferocity of prayer. A man who had built her a room when she was 6. She heard footsteps in the corridor at dawn, measured, deliberate, the stride of someone who had been awake for hours and was deciding, with each step, how much truth to carry through the door. Eleanor stood. She smoothed her dress, still damp at the hem, still borrowed, still fitting badly at the shoulders. She positioned herself beside the window, where the first copper light of morning was beginning to push through the storm clouds, and waited. The knock was soft. She opened the door. He was not what she expected. Tall, yes. Her father had described him as towering, monstrous, a man built for intimidation. But the person in the corridor had the hollowed look of someone who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time. His hair was grey at the temples. His eyes, dark, careful, searching her face the way a navigator searches for landfall, held no malice. He held a folded letter in his right hand. Miss Hargrove, I am the Duke of Ashworth. I know who you are. My housekeeper told me. Also, the 14 windows and the pianoforte, tuned for a woman who does not exist, were suggestive. She did not step aside. She did not invite him in. She stood in the doorway and watched his face, the way she watched ledgers, for the number that did not belong. May I come in? That depends. Are you going to tell me why my father's enemy has been furnishing a bedroom for me since I was a child? Or are you going to offer me tea and speak around it? Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. As though he had expected this voice, this precision, and had been dreading and hoping for it in equal measure. He held out the letter. Your father wrote this. It was meant for you. She took the letter. His fingers were steady when hers were not. She noticed that and hated it. She stepped back into the room, and he followed, stopping just inside the doorway, leaning against the frame, the way tall men lean when they are trying to take up less space than they occupy. Eleanor unfolded the letter. Her father's handwriting. She would know it in the dark, by the shape of his H's alone, the way they leaned left, as though bracing against wind. She read, standing by the window, in the copper light that was now streaming fully through the glass. The letter was 3 pages. She read it twice. Then she folded it along its original creases, aligned the edges with the edge of the writing desk, precisely, deliberately, a gesture that required her hands to do something geometric, or the rest of her threatened to collapse, and turned to face the Duke of Ashworth. You are his brother? Half-brother. Same father, different mothers. And the hatred? Performance. Our father, the old Duke, would have destroyed any connection between us. Your father played the enemy to keep you hidden from a man who believed bloodlines existed to be controlled. My father spent 23 years teaching me to hate you. He said your name like a wound he kept reopening on purpose. Every year, every Christmas, the same stories of betrayal and ruin. Her voice held steady. Her hands did not. She pressed them flat against the desk. Was any of it true? The ruin was real. Our father caused it. Your father let me take the blame, because a brother who is hated is safer than a brother who is known. He paused. I held you the night you were born. Your mother asked me to protect you if anything happened. She died 3 days later. Your father and I agreed that the safest protection was distance and the appearance of enmity. Eleanor absorbed this the way stone absorbs rain. Slowly, completely, with no visible sign of the saturation happening beneath the surface. She looked at the room around her, the books she loved, the pianoforte she played. The desk angled from morning light because, she understood now, someone had been told she liked to write in the mornings. You built this room from his letters? Yes. The Petrarch. He wrote that you were translating the sonnets when you were 14. He was proud. He could not say so to anyone but me. And the Botanical Encyclopedia. You told him you wanted to study soil composition. He thought it was peculiar. I thought it was interesting. She looked at him for a long time. His face held the particular exhaustion of a man who had rehearsed this conversation for years and found the reality of it nothing like the rehearsal. She recognized that exhaustion. She had worn it herself, every time she opened her father's study door, expecting to find him alive, and found instead the geometry of absence. Chair pushed back, pipe cold, window open to a garden that no longer had a purpose. I would like to see the household accounts, she said. He blinked. The accounts? I managed my father's finances for 8 years. I identified 3 fraudulent creditors, renegotiated the lease on our London property, and kept us solvent through 2 seasons that his solicitor described as irrecoverable. She pulled the chair from the desk and sat down. If this estate operates on my father's fortune, I already know its structure. I would like to see what you have done with it. You have been here less than 12 hours. And in those hours, I have learned that everything I believed about my life was a lie, constructed by 2 men who loved me too much to tell me the truth. I find that I need something real to hold, Your Grace. Numbers are real. Will you show me the accounts, or shall I find them myself? He showed her the accounts. The ledgers arrived in the library, which became, within the first day, her territory. A long room with south-facing windows, a fireplace that drew well, and shelves that had been organized by someone who valued appearance over function. She reorganized them within a week. Agricultural texts near the desk, legal references by the door, fiction banished to the upper shelves, where it could do no harm to serious work. The Duke said nothing about the reorganization. She suspected he had not noticed, which told her everything she needed to know about how closely he had been managing his own estate. The steward's name was Alderton. She found his irregularities on the 3rd day. Mr. Alderton. She did not look up from the ledger when he entered the library. The September grain delivery record was open on the desk, cross-referenced with the miller's dispatch log she had obtained that morning by walking to the village in boots that were still damp from the storm. The grain stores for September list 400 bushels received. The miller's records show 460 dispatched. I have a question. Alderton was a large man, with the confidence of someone who had never been audited by anyone who understood numbers. He stood in the doorway, hands clasped behind his back, smile already forming. Miss Hargrove, the grain accounts are really quite... Where are the 60 bushels, Mr. Alderton? The smile died. She watched it go with the clinical attention she gave to every number that did not balance. Behind Alderton, in the corridor, she could see the Duke standing just out of sight, arms crossed, listening. He had been doing that, appearing at the edges of rooms when she worked, not interrupting, not assisting, just watching with an expression she could not yet read. Alderton left the estate on the 5th day. The coal supplier was renegotiated on the 7th. The tenant agreement for the southern farmland, undervalued by 30%, she calculated, sitting in the library with copper light falling across the columns of figures, was rewritten on the 9th. On the 11th evening, she found the Duke in the library. He was sitting in the chair nearest the fire, her chair, she had begun to think of it, though she had no right to claim furniture in a house that was not hers, reading a treatise on crop rotation that she had left open on the side table. You've read Tull, he said without looking up. I've read Tull, Young, and Coke of Holcombe. I've also corresponded with a gentleman in Norfolk on the subject of soil drainage. She sat in the opposite chair. The fire was low. The room smelled of old paper and the particular warmth of a house that has been closed against autumn air. He believes I am a land steward named E. Hargrave. The omission of a single letter has granted me access to agricultural discourse that would be denied to someone called Eleanor. He set the book down. That must be infuriating. It is efficient. Fury is a luxury for people who have time to be angry. I prefer results. You have produced quite a few results in 11 days. Your estate was not badly managed, Your Grace. It was unmanaged. There is a difference. Neglect is not the same as incompetence. It is the signature of a man whose attention was elsewhere. She paused.
The fire crackled. Where was your attention? He looked at her then. Not the careful, navigating look of their first meeting. Something rawer, less controlled. The expression of a man whose defenses had been dismantled so gradually he did not notice until the walls were already down. On a road in Hampshire, waiting for a carriage. The silence that followed was warm and heavy, like wool laid over a wound. Eleanor held his gaze for 3 seconds, then 4, then 5, and looked away. She reached for the tulle, opened it to a page she had marked, and began to read aloud about turnip cultivation. It was, she knew, a retreat. But some advances require a retreat first, the way a tide pulls back before it reaches further up the shore than it has ever been. They sat in the library until the fire burned to embers. He did not speak again. Neither did she. It was the first evening the house felt like something other than a museum of secrets. The following week she found the pianoforte retuned. She had not asked for it. She had played it once, that first night. A single middle C, a test, a question pressed into ivory, and had not touched it since. But when she sat down on the bench and placed her hands on the keys, the instrument responded with a clarity that made her breath catch. Someone had brought a tuner from the village. Someone had remembered that she played. She played Handel that evening. The saraband. Slow, deliberate. Each note placed the way she placed numbers in a ledger, with precision and without apology. Halfway through the second movement, she became aware of breathing in the corridor. She did not stop. She did not turn. She played the piece to its end, and when the last note faded, she heard his footsteps, not retreating, not approaching, but shifting weight, as though he had been standing for some time, and his body had finally reminded him of its presence. "You don't have to listen from the hallway," she said to the closed door.
There is a chair.
A pause. Then the door opened. He entered and sat in the chair by the window, not close, but present. She played a second piece, a third. The room filled with sound and firelight, and the smell of the beeswax candles that Mrs. Calloway lit in the East Wing every evening now, a ritual that had not existed before Eleanor's arrival, but had established itself with the quiet authority of things that are needed. When she finished, her hands rested on the keys. "My father used to sit outside my practice room. I could hear his chair creak when he leaned forward during the difficult passages." She traced the edge of a black key with her fingernail. "He never told me he was listening. I never told him I knew." The Duke said nothing, but his hand, resting on the arm of the chair, opened, palm up, fingers relaxed, in a gesture so small it might have been involuntary. An offering, an acknowledgement that some forms of listening are themselves a kind of love. She stood, closed the lid of the pianoforte, and left the room. In the corridor, she pressed her back against the wall and placed one hand flat against her sternum, where something was expanding, warm, structural, load-bearing, that she did not yet have a name for, but recognized as dangerous. The letter from Sir Edmund Graves arrived on a Tuesday. Eleanor was in the library. She was always in the library now, the desk covered in correspondence, the shelves reorganized twice, a pot of tea growing cold beside a stack of tenant petitions, when the Duke appeared in the doorway holding an envelope as though it were a dead thing he had found on his step. "Who is Sir Edmund Graves?" "My father's executor, the old Duke's man." He set the letter on the desk. His jaw was tight. He has learned of your existence. Eleanor read the letter. The language was courteous in the way that a drawn sword is polished, every surface gleaming, every edge designed to cut. Sir Edmund Graves, executor of the Ashworth Family Trust, requested the pleasure of an audience regarding certain provisions pertaining to undisclosed descendants of the bloodline. The word descendants was underlined. He means me. He means you. What provisions? The Duke sat down across from her. The library was dim, late afternoon, clouds over Hampshire, the copper light that she had come to associate with this room reduced to pewter. My father's trust grants authority over any descendant of the Ashworth line until a suitable marriage is arranged. Suitable meaning strategic, consolidating. His word. And this trust supersedes my father's will. Graves will argue it does. Blood preempts bequest, he'll claim. Eleanor aligned the letter with the edge of the desk. She pressed the creases flat with her thumb. It was the gesture she made when she needed her hands to perform precision, while her mind performed something far less controlled. How long have you known about this provision? 6 years. And you brought me here anyway. The alternative was worse. You, alone, in a city, with no legal protection when Graves found you. And he would have found you, Eleanor. My father's machinery does not stop because the machinist dies. It was the first time he had used her Christian name. She heard it land in the room like a key turning in a lock she had not known existed. She did not correct him. She filed it. The way his voice dropped half a register on the second syllable. The way his hands gripped the arms of the chair, as though the name had cost him something to say. When does he arrive? Thursday. Graves arrived on Thursday at 11 in the morning, in a carriage without a crest, accompanied by a solicitor whose face had the practiced blankness of a man paid to deliver bad news. Eleanor watched from the library window as they crossed the gravel drive. She counted Graves's steps, measured, theatrical, the walk of a man who had been performing authority for so long he had forgotten it was a performance. She straightened the papers on her desk. She poured a fresh cup of tea. She sat down and waited. The Duke brought them to the library. Eleanor did not stand when they entered. She had learned, in the 11 days she had spent dismantling and rebuilding this household, that a woman seated at a desk covered in ledgers projects more authority than a woman rising to greet. Sir Edmund. She did not extend her hand. Please sit. Graves was perhaps 60. Silver hair, silver watch chain, the particular confidence of a man who had spent 4 decades as the instrument of a more powerful man's will, and had come to believe the power was his own. He looked at Eleanor the way one looks at a document, assessing its value, its vulnerability, its use. Miss Hargrove, I understand you have been settling in. I have been conducting a full audit of the estate accounts, renegotiating 3 supplier contracts, and rewriting the tenant agreements for the southern farmland. Settling in is one way to describe it. Graves smiled. It did not reach his eyes. How industrious. Your father would be... My father is not the subject of this meeting. You are here because of a trust provision. I have 3 questions, and I would like answers before you state your business. The smile faded. The Duke, standing near the fireplace, went very still. First, Eleanor said, does the trust define descendant by blood or by legal acknowledgement? By blood. Second, has my blood ever been legally acknowledged as part of the Ashworth line? Any court document, any sworn affidavit, any public record naming me as a descendant of the late Duke? Graves shifted in his chair. The resemblance alone. Resemblance is not testimony. Resemblance is what old men cite when they lack evidence. Has my blood been legally acknowledged? Yes or no? Not formally, but given time. Third. She did not raise her voice. The room contracted around her stillness. The Duke by the fire, the solicitor frozen mid-note, Graves gripping the arm of his chair with fingers that had gone white at the knuckles. If you pursue an unsubstantiated blood claim against a woman who is legally placed under the guardianship of a sitting duke, a duke who holds a seat in the House of Lords and retains solicitors who charge more per hour than your man charges per day, on what grounds do you imagine you will prevail? The silence lasted 6 seconds. Eleanor counted them. Graves stood. His solicitor closed his notebook. They left within the quarter hour. But Eleanor, watching from the library window as the carriage pulled away, saw Graves turn and look back at the house, not with defeat, but with the calculating patience of a man who has been told no before, and has always, eventually, found a way around it. "He will return," she said. The Duke was beside her at the window. She had not heard him approach. His reflection appeared in the glass next to hers, taller, older, the grey at his temples catching the pale light. "I know." Eleanor pressed her forehead against the glass. It was cold. Outside, the garden was being dismantled by autumn, the roses stripped, the hedges thinning, the ground softening toward mud. She thought of her father's garden, the one she had tended as a child, pulling weeds because he said weeding was the only honest work. You could see the result immediately. You knew what you had done. There was no ambiguity. She missed that clarity. She missed the version of the world where enemies were enemies, and a pianoforte was just a pianoforte, and a room was just a room. "When I was 9, she said, my father came home from London in a fury I had never seen. Locked himself in his study for 3 days. I brought meals to the door. On the 3rd day, I pressed my ear to the wood and heard him say your name, not as a curse," the way he usually said it. Softer. The way you say the name of someone you miss. She traced a raindrop's path down the glass with her fingertip. "I catalogued it. I catalogue everything. I didn't understand it then. Now I do." The Duke's reflection closed its eyes. He loved you. The hatred was the shape his love was forced to take. And you loved him. The distance was yours. "Yes. Graves will not take me." Her voice carried the flat certainty she used for numbers, for things that were true because the arithmetic demanded it. "Guardianship will not hold against a sustained legal challenge. He will find barristers. He will manufacture documentation. He will petition courts that are sympathetic to bloodline arguments because half the peerage survives on them." "I know." "There is one legal structure he cannot challenge." She said it, looking at his reflection rather than his face. It was easier, somehow. The glass between them, the garden visible through both of their images, the rain beginning again on the other side of the window. "Marriage." The Duke's reflection closed its eyes. A wife cannot be claimed by a family trust. A duchess is not a ward. If Graves returns, and he will, the only defense that cannot be petitioned away is a marriage certificate. She turned from the window to face him directly. "I am identifying the most efficient legal defense available. I am noting that it requires your cooperation." "Eleanor." His voice was rough. He had not moved from the window. His hands were at his sides, but she could see the tension in them. Fingers slightly curled, the tendons visible, the posture of a man holding himself back from something. "I will not marry you to protect you." "Then we have a problem, because Graves—" "I will not marry you to protect you. I will not marry you because of the trust, or the threat, or because your father asked me to stand between you and the world." He turned from the window. The copper light, that persistent, particular light that defined this room, this hour, this impossible situation, caught his face, and she saw for the first time the full, unguarded landscape of what he had been carrying. "I would marry you because you counted the windows before you removed your coat, because you demanded the accounts before you asked for comfort, because you have reorganized my library twice, and I have not objected because it is better both times, Because you wrote to a man in Norfolk about soil drainage and signed yourself E. Hargrave, and I have never in my life wanted to publish someone's work under their real name, as much as I want to publish yours. Eleanor's hand found the windowsill behind her. The wood was cool and solid under her fingers. Her heart was doing something rapid and structural, as though it were being rebuilt from the inside, while still required to function. "That," she said, "is an acceptable reason." He crossed the distance between them in 2 steps. His hand found her face, his thumb against her cheekbone, his fingers in her hair, and she realized his hands were shaking. The man who had waited 17 years, who had furnished a room for a girl he had held as an infant, who had endured 2 decades of performed hatred from the brother he loved. His hands were shaking, and she reached up and steadied them with her own, pressing his palm flat against her cheek, holding it there. He kissed her in the library, in the copper light, with the rain falling against the window and the fire burning low, and the reorganized shelves standing witness. It was not a gentle kiss. It was the kiss of 2 people who had spent their entire lives being precise and controlled and measured, and who had discovered, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, that precision is no defense against this. They married on a Tuesday. The chapel at Thornfield Park was small and cold, and the rain had not stopped for 3 days. Mrs. Calloway wept. The vicar, who had known the Duke for 20 years and had never seen him bring another person to anything, read the service with the care of a man who understood he was witnessing something inevitable. Graves returned in December. He brought barristers. He brought documents. He brought the accumulated legal weight of a dead man's obsession with dynasty. He was met at the front door by the Duchess of Ashworth, who informed him that his blood claim had been rendered void by her marriage, that his trust provision had been reviewed by 3 independent barristers, who had each independently described it as unenforceable, and that his carriage was blocking the coal delivery, which, she noted, was now supplied by a vendor who did not overcharge. The Duke stood behind her in the hallway. He did not speak. He did not need to. Graves looked at his face and saw something worse than triumph. Peace. Spring came to Thornfield with the particular insistence of a season that has been delayed. Eleanor planted a kitchen garden, not ornamental, not decorative, but rows of vegetables and herbs organized with the same precision she applied to everything she touched. She published her first paper on soil drainage in the Norfolk Agricultural Journal under her own name. When the editor wrote to question whether Mrs. E. Ashworth was a typographical error, the Duke replied personally that the Duchess's expertise exceeded that of most gentlemen in the county. The editor did not write again. On a morning in June, Eleanor sat at her desk in the library, her library now, by conquest rather than invitation, and watched the copper light move across the page of a letter she was composing to a botanical society in Edinburgh. The shelves were organized for the 3rd time. The pianoforte in the East Wing room, the room that had waited 17 years for her, was played now every evening. The Duke sat in the corridor outside and listened, as he had always listened, to the sound of something he had built being filled. Their daughter was born the following winter. The Duke held her in the library, by the window in the copper light. Eleanor watched his face and saw the same expression he had worn the morning he first knocked on her door, the look of a man carrying something precious and fragile, who has finally been told he is allowed to set it down. "She has your brother's eyes," Eleanor said. "She has your hands." He touched the baby's fingers, tiny, curled, already gripping his thumb with a force that seemed to surprise him. "She will count things." The room in the East Wing became the nursery. The pianoforte stayed. The Petrarch stayed. The botanical encyclopedia that had been placed on the shelf when Eleanor was 17 stayed. But the room was no longer a chronicle of absence. It was loud and warm, and full of the particular chaos that arrives when a house stops being maintained and starts being lived in. Some rooms are built by architects, measured, assigned, purposeful before anyone enters them. And some rooms are built by the people who arrive with a single trunk in a rainstorm, who count the windows before they remove their coat, who demand the accounts before they ask for comfort, and who discover, in the steady arithmetic of presence, that being expected is not the same as being known, and that being known, fully, precisely, without performance or protection, is the only form of love worth reorganizing your shelves for.